with confidence, so much can change. And I realize that confidence comes in speaking to people. You and I right now, there's confidence in how we speak with each other and how we're able to relay messages. There's confidence in getting up sometimes and just putting yourself out there for people. There's confidence that comes in so many different ways.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. Today, we have Sandra Campos on the show. She's a 3-time CEO where she's led brands that you've all heard of, some of the biggest retail and fashion brands in the world. She's a 2-time founder. She is a private board member, a public board member, a contributor on CNBC, and she is an expert on the consumer. Now, Sandra's Why Not Now idea that she took action on in 2009 might surprise you. This is the perfect example of work-life integration versus separation. Sandra will share the moment where she found herself with 3 kids under age 4, a very high-powered, high-velocity job with a lot of travel, and going through a divorce. And she talks about what she did in that moment. Sandra also shares how she considers decisions and the tools that she uses. We talk about a lot of different areas in this conversation. And one of the things I appreciate most about Sandra is her ability to understand the macro picture for things. So she shares so much value in this conversation and in this episode. I hope you enjoy. And without further ado, here's Sandra Campos. Sandra, welcome to the Why Not Now show, and thank you for being here with me. And in the spirit of Why Not Now, let's hop in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now? We'll reverse engineer and close that delta from when you went from idea to action.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. And for asking such a probing question, because it really does make me think how many times in my life I've actually had to say, why not now? Whether it was moving from Texas to New York, not knowing anyone. But I think the biggest one that's really been the most impactful throughout my last 15 years of my life and my career was back in 2009. As I had gone through a divorce, I had 3 kids under the age of 4. I would have been kind of moving up my career path in retail and the fashion industry. And I was running a very large business with hundreds of people reporting to me, but also traveling multiple days a week. And I knew that that was not something that was going to be possible for me because I didn't have the circumstances with a failing marriage. The second part was that it wasn't the type of mother that I thought I wanted to be, with somebody who was gone half the week. Because as it was, I was getting home at 8 or 8:30 at night and, having to catch up on emails, and you don't see them until they're in bed or after bed. And it was just hard. So the choice for me was, what do I do? Do I go and try to find a different job in corporate, or do I actually try to create an entrepreneurial role that will give me some more flexibility? So I chose the latter. And while you have a lot of comfort with resources in a corporate executive role, you've got the compensation, you've got benefits, you've got all the things that are there from a resource standpoint. And I was at Polo Ralph Lauren at the time, which is obviously one of the largest iconic brands and retailers out there. And I decided instead to, with a business partner, Tony Malello, he and I, we decided that we were going to go after a business that wasn't really existing at the time. So it was focused on celebrities and celebrity brand management. And at the time, because I had 3 small kids who were watching Disney every single weekend, I was seeing Selena Gomez every weekend, and Miley Cyrus and Demi Lovato and that whole crew of millennials who were on TV on Disney. And we created a business plan. We went to CAA, Creative Artists Agency, and we presented this plan. And they said, great, who do you want? And we said, we want Selena Gomez. And from that point, after they said, great, go and get the funding, we then had to go and knock on many, many, many doors, had 99 no's until we finally got the first yes. And then we were able to actually really take a stand on building out the first lifestyle brand for Selena, but also the first one for teens at retail. So it was a very exclusive partnership. At the time, it was with Kmart, which unfortunately isn't around anymore, but Kmart was quite big, 1,500 stores. We were in all the stores at the time. We had a great CEO who really believed in her and believed in us and believed in the business. We had manufacturing partners. So we had 14 categories, and it was great. It was a 5-year kind of guaranteed business that we had. And it didn't come easily in the beginning. And it was certainly something that it was a leap of faith, because we really didn't know what we were going to be able to build, but we were ambitious enough, we were persistent enough. And it was also the time in 2009 when everything in retail as a business started changing. There was Facebook, then all of a sudden there was Instagram, then there were D2C brands that started in 2010, and you started to have Snapchat, and social media channels started changing. Influencers all of a sudden started coming on the scene saying, no, designer A, you're not going to tell me what I'm going to wear, because I'm going to tell you what I want to wear. So that dynamic started shifting. And then there became an actual e-commerce business, where it was, you have to have not only your physical footprint, but you need to have something online. And it became more of a flagship. So there's a lot of consumer technology. So over that 6-year time period, the industry changed. And it was being revolutionized. So the fact that I didn't know what I was doing by taking a leap of faith, we really didn't know where it was going to go. It ended up being very successful for quite some time, but also at a time when the business was changing so much that I got to learn so much, because we were there with her as she had less than 1 million followers on Facebook. So that was the only thing that existed, and obviously exploded. She had music then. So we did a lot of collaborations with her, personal appearances with her, things that really weren't being done at the time at retail. There weren't a lot of these partnerships. So now it's commonplace, right? It's kind of main table stakes to be able to have an e-commerce brand. It's table stakes to be able to think about your customer and make sure that you meet them where they are. Whether that's bringing music and combining music with lifestyle, et cetera. So it just was something that was incredibly energizing and a great learning experience. So it has absolutely influenced everything that I've done since then. So that why not now moment, which was somewhat of a forced moment for me to say, I have to make a decision, became the best career move that I made.
Okay, I have so many questions in so many different areas, but I am really, really grateful that you led with this story, and it's clearly impacted every aspect of your life, and now how it informs what we were talking about earlier, making different decisions about boards and how you spend your time. But I feel like everyone listening right now is still kind of thinking back to the top of the story of, okay, here you are in corporate, high-powered exec, young children, traveling a lot, all the things, and you did decide to make this shift in 2009, let's say. Remember, that wasn't exactly like hey, let's spread our wings and all jump right now. It was such an economic cycle. So I got goosebumps when I was listening to you, and I feel like I can see the women nodding and saying, tell me more about. It was forced, you said, this decision to a certain extent, it sounds like. And how did you manufacture the bravery specifically to do the entrepreneurial route? Because a lot of corporate execs and CEOs, and you've managed huge run huge businesses, but they're not exactly usually the founder type or wired that way. So you did a 180 probably with your entire life. And I know there's so many women who are wanting to do something somewhat similar, especially because they want more time with their kids. So Can we back up to pre-decision and tell us what data were you considered? How did you get there?
Well, first and foremost, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So I'll start there. I'm a first generation Mexican American. My parents were entrepreneurs because, again, out of necessity for them, they created their own businesses, and they created a tortilla factory. I worked in the tortilla factory from the time I was 10 years old. So I knew I was back in the warehouse packing boxes. I was sealing bags with tortillas and then I was counting them. I was all across the tortilla factory for years from the time that I was 10 until the time that I was a junior in high school. And so I think that was always there, the entrepreneurial piece. I knew it. My family had it, multiple aspects of my family, not my immediate family, but also aunts, uncles, et cetera. We learned the tortilla business from one uncle, another came and learned from my father. So it was one of those things that happens with families when, especially coming to a new country. So that was one part. The second part is that, I didn't think about it at the time. I think naivete is also something that has helped me in my life because I was 20 years old and had never been to New York City before. But I decided to send a resume to one company, got a job, and it said, I'm moving. I didn't have family. I didn't have friends. I didn't have a place to live, which was really beyond stupid when I think about what I went through, because I would never allow one of my kids to do that today. But I took that leap of faith, had to work 3 jobs my first 3 years because I moved to make $17,500 a year, which was clearly not enough then and not enough now. But so I was working round the clock, but doing it because I knew I wanted to be at a certain place where I was ambitiously driven to say, I want to be a CEO one day. I want to be running a business one day. So that's what got me to say, I'm just doing it. I didn't think about it. I didn't look back. And I think in my life, I've done a lot of that. I've done a lot of okay, I don't really think too much about it. I don't cross every T and dot every I. I'm very decisive. And if I want something, I'm just going to make it happen. So I know that might sound not as practical for everyone because trust me, there have been many times, even in the last 10 years, and my kids are older, when I've wanted to do other things. And I've said, I can't really do that because I've got college to pay for. I've got 3 kids in college at the same time and other obligations that, that point you in a certain direction. But I think that no matter what, more than anything else, it's belief in myself. And Tony, my partner, and I, who did Selena together, it was belief in ourselves. And he also comes from a similar background where he's also equally as driven and equally as assertive about making sure we're going to get things done. So I think it just happened to work out that we both were the ones kind of pushing each other and making sure that we were successful in what we were going to do. So, one is being naive about what's on the other side and not knowing. Another one is really believing in yourself and just making sure no matter what, you're going to push through.
What's interesting as I'm listening to you is you had a lot of data behind you of operating that way when you made that decision, it sounds like, right? So you can't argue experience. And if at 19 you're headed to New York for $17,500 and you're just like, I'm going to get it, I'm going to figure this out, that muscle and that practice, I mean, that's what obviously got you to where you were. And I think about that scenario that you mentioned in your upbringing, that was data input constantly. So that was always an option for you saw it, even if it wasn't a conscious thought, you saw it happen. So it just reminds me how important it is, even if we're not entrepreneurs, but we would like our kids to think entrepreneurially, finding ways that they're exposed to that so early so they just realize that's one option, a great one.
It wasn't scary because of that. Maybe I think there's an aspect that's scary, of course, because you're taking a risk with your own money and your own finances, and you don't know where that's going to come from. And I'm very fortunate because I had already gotten to a place where I didn't, I had a nanny. There's so many other women out there who don't have the options that I had at that point. So I'm very grateful that I was at a different place. But I was doing it on my own, and to me, I think throughout my entire life, I've had to do everything for myself. I've had to do everything that I didn't have a choice. So I think the other part that's always been in the back of my mind, and still is today, there is no option B. There is no plan B. This is my plan A, and I have to make everything plan A work. So that's the other piece that's constantly in my mind.
And you've built up that trust and belief in yourself, seeing it work, figuring it out over and over, right? So it's quite possible that someone could argue the bigger risk or bravery, that happened back going to New York or this or that. However, you mentioned you're decisive and you mentioned not having the option. I recently heard, and I wish I could attribute it to the person. I don't know who the author was of this quote, but it was, don't worry so much about making the right decision, make the decision right. And I, did a head tilt. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what you end up doing, right? Like, yeah, you make it right. You figure it out to make it work, right? But let's go to the decisiveness and then the criteria of how you make decisions now too, regardless of the variables at play. But you're on boards, you have an incredible nonprofit, and you have this love for horses. You are doing so much for women and diversity and elevating women. And so lots of decisions all day, every day. And that's not new, I'm sure. But how do you approach decisions, big and small? Do you kind of have some framework?
It's interesting because my career has been in consumer. So consumers are very impacted and influenced by macroeconomic issues, but also by culture. So I really consider myself to be somebody who's an innovator, but also very, very culturally engaged and very focused on what's happening in culture today with individuals, with, again, anything having to do with business or celebrities or whatever is happening to change the generations. And I have Gen Z kids, but there's millennials and every other demographic. Now we're going to be talking about Gen Alpha, which is part of your child's generation, and that's going to be very, very different. So I think about things from a business angle. I feel like I am so informed every day because I'm constantly reading, I'm constantly ingesting information, I'm constantly meeting new people and asking a lot of questions, and I'm very curious and I always want to continue to learn. So because of that, I feel that I'm very informed already. So I've always said that data provides one part of what that decision making is going to be, but it's really instinct that drives it. And the instincts come from experience for me. The instincts that I have come from what I have experienced, either personally, professionally, what I've learned through those experiences, what I learn and hear about. And sometimes you're going to be right and sometimes you're going to be wrong. Hopefully you're right more than you are wrong. But I'm okay taking those chances of being wrong just to go out there and see what works and what may not work, but what may actually be better. I tell my kids all the time, if you go left and make that left turn, you decide to go to that school versus another school, your life will be entirely different. You might turn that left corner and you're going to go to a totally different place than if you turn the corner to the right, right? And that happens. But when you make those changes, you make those decisions, you go there, you then are going to decide like that's the choice you made. So now when you make that choice, how are you going to make that the best life? How are you going to make that decision the best decision possible instead of worrying about what could have happened or what may have been the case on the other side, because you've made the choice already. So now you've got all the information that's ahead of you and you just need to go with that and go in that direction positively. Because it's true. I mean, no matter what your choices are, you can make choices all day long. And we have choices to make every day, all day long.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us.
A mentor once said to me, 99% of the time, and they had built a really big company and sold it to Amazon, and they were at, they went from 0 to 1. They said, it's going to change anyway. So you got to get started, right? So even whatever's in that deck, if they're pitching you, if you're pitching them, that's great. Hopefully there's some traction there with whatever numbers they're sharing, but it's going to change. So you have to with action comes clarity kind of, right? So
with action comes clarity. I love that.
Isn't that true though? Like
one way or the other, by the way. It's like not always great clarity, but
no, but I've never figured things out by just trying to think harder with my moleskin at a Starbucks. Even the neuroscience shows that mood follows action, right? Like we think, oh, change my mindset, then my behavior. Not always. I've never really thought my way out of a bad mood. Usually I have to do something, but I love this. I'm like on this decisive kick. A renegade, she's an orthopedic surgeon who's a colonel in the Army, and she's deployed. And I talked to her this weekend, and we're like, I was like talking to her, and I mentioned something about having a surgical approach to something I'm navigating in life. And she's listening, And I'm telling a surgeon this, like I know what I'm talking about. But I thought if I'm going to do this, I'm going to know where everything's going to land. And she's like, no, but surgeons have to be decisive too, right? You can't just plan and try and control everything. You have to make these decisions. So you had shared that you have a pretty big goal, and you don't have to share and articulate exactly what that is if you're not up for it, but you're making decisions on your time based on that goal, and it's a priority. Do you have criteria of how you navigate that decision tree?
I wish I did a better job of it, and I have to work at it because I am somebody who loves and is always willing to give time to people. And that, as you know, because I know you do as well, can take up a lot of time. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, what did I actually get done today? And I've actually ended up finding myself in the last couple of years probably spending more time doing that, whether it's with founders or Latinas or people who want to be entrepreneurs or who are looking for job changes. Something that happened during the pandemic to all of us was we all had to sit there and say, what now? Especially if you were navigating through business changes, losing jobs, spouses losing jobs, family members, all the things that took place and are still taking place to some degree. We're all navigating through that. But I got more and more calls from women predominantly who were, I need to pivot my career from this to that. I need to make a change because my husband lost his job, or I need to do this. My husband passed away. I mean, it was always something from women that were big decisions on, I need to pivot, right? And I've done a lot of pivoting in my career, which I realized I hadn't called it pivoting, but I'd realized that what I was doing throughout, again, not deliberately and not planned. So I wasn't doing what you were doing to say, how do I plan everything and put my roadmap together and make sure I hit and check every single box? But I knew that instinctively, I wanted to be a CEO who was well-rounded. I knew instinctively I loved consumer. And so I was also in the industry at a time when I was able to navigate through different positions and roles and experience a lot more than you can today. That's much more siloed. So with all of that came this curiosity to learn more and curiosity to go into technology and understand consumer tech. And when these consumer tech companies in 2010 started, I was like, well, wait, what is that? And how do they work that? And what does that coding mean? And what does that mean? And what does that mean? And so I think those questions that I kept asking kept helping me be more informed so that I felt more confident, more comfortable. And I think at the end, we talk about confidence. I was the CEO of Diane von Furstenberg. Diane von Furstenberg herself is all about women and empowering women's confidence. And it was something that I hadn't really thought about as much as I did, obviously, when I was leading that business, because it was something we did every single day. But with confidence, so much can change. And I realized that confidence comes in speaking to people. You and I right now, there's confidence in how we speak with each other and how we're able to relay messages. There's confidence in getting up sometimes and just putting yourself out there for people. There's confidence that comes in so many different ways. But the more informed you are, the more you can feel that confidence. And I think that while I don't feel like I ever really had mentors per se, or anybody who was necessarily putting me in situations early on, I did have people who were saying she's pretty good. I'll give her that chance. I think this is what I want to do to others, which is why I spend the time, getting back to the question about time and decision-making. I know what difference one person can make in someone's life. I've seen it. I've seen it happen. I'm seeing it happen as I help other women as well. So that, to me, I will never regret spending that time and taking that time out of my day to help somebody else for it. So that's one part. I will always prioritize helping others. The second part, in terms of just how do I think about my life today? I think that comes with, I thought life was going to be so much easier after the pandemic. And I took my family, I bought a farm before the pandemic, thankfully, in upstate New York. I have rescue horses and rescue dogs, and I thought it was going to be so much simpler. It's not at all simpler. There's so much that goes on, and it's super busy. And I love all that because I'm somebody who doesn't sit still very often. So I love being busy. But with that comes you have to stop and sit for a minute and say, all of a sudden the years are flying by. Am I doing what I need to do for myself? form my family, I have plenty of years left to be in love, to go and travel, to spend time with someone, the things that are so important as human beings, that connection that we have, whether it's your parents, your grandparents. I just came back from my grandmother who passed away 2 weeks ago, and I was there for 3 days before she passed away in hospice. And before I left, I thought, I don't want to miss this. I don't want to regret not having been there because I regret not having seen my grandfather before he passed away. And I did. And it was the best decision that I could have made to go there. And I think that was something when you're talking about time and decisions and what's really important. I'm now focusing and saying, okay, how much of this is really going to help me as a human being and help me feel the happiness that I want, the clarity that I want, that does help me professionally as well. Because if I'm more whole on my own and I feel better and happier and more contentment, then of course I'm going to be more productive naturally. I'm going to be able to think clearer. I'm going to have so many better relationships from a professional standpoint. That's how I see it. So the decisions of how I spend time now are a combination of that to make sure that I am really focused on what truly matters and the family and, love of life and being able to spend time with somebody that you want to spend time with. And that could be your kids, it could be a spouse, it could be any number of people, right? It's just like, and friends. And making sure, like on my vision board for this year, which I did with my 20-year-old daughter, I had on there gatherings. I had a lot of things which I realized after the fact that had to do with home. It was sleep. It was travel experiences. It was a long table of people gathering together. And there were like 2 pictures for business. Granted, business has to be there because it has to pay for everything else. But but I realized that what I'm missing is all the rest. So that's where I'm prioritizing my time, is to be able to get the rest and feel that real comfort of having my community.
I love that because you're organizing around execution. I mean, you're doing what you would do in business for your personal, you are the CEO of your life. We all know that. But CEOs have to create results, right? And so they need to organize around the execution and operationalize to a certain extent. So I love the engineering side. Vision board is an awesome first step. And then the action of that, it's all related, right? It's kind of like the insight, intuitive instinct as well as that data. And in my experience, especially women who have been able to do a lot and make a lot of progress in their career per se, we don't always do that around ourselves. So with you and I'm thinking about business like KPIs and how do we measure this, right? Like gatherings and there's probably a soul metric that you check in with. And I believe in kind of that giving things oxygen, they'll become more scalable because you have multiple people working on solutions for you, even when you're not around, right? Sure. And when I say that, I mean like verbalize, sharing, hey, this is what I'm looking to do, even if it's not someone that you think is super relevant to the situation.
Or what people might say, you're putting it out in the universe and it'll come back to you, right? So just manifesting, or how somebody wants to claim that. And I do believe I believe that there is that, right? We have to believe in ourselves and have to put it out there and say, that's what I'm going to go for. Because if you don't, time just flies by. We're all of a sudden in March already.
I agree. And it's not just, there's action behind it. You have to actually say it, or, you know what I mean? So I agree 100%. It's like a vision board with a spreadsheet, because you need to be able to take even if they're not calculated, not everything that counts can be counted. Everything that can count, it counts. Einstein, we realize. But is there anything that you wanted to share goal-wise that you might be thinking about?
Oh, I don't know. Certainly there's the list is long, and the list is long, but at the same time, I'm trying to prioritize that list. So I think, one thing for sure is to make sure that the community and the friendships, like even ours, that we said feel like we've known each other for a lot longer than we actually have, but those are important. Friends help lift us up, and we need that every day. I do anyway.
And gathering, I do too. Like, it's truly, what fuels us, and gatherings being a goal of yours. How cool that, you are able to bring the people and the things into one space, that you also get equal value exchange then to be able to, in real time through connection, help each other with what they're thinking about, but without being forced, right? It's not a networking event or a master, So I love that. Like, I just was wondering if there's anything we could help you with, but I hear a lot of curiosity. Like you mentioned your finger on the pulse with culture. That must take an extremely curious person to consistently be open and looking and genuinely wondering.
I think I should have been like a millennial or a Gen Z multi-hyphenate. Either that or I've had ADHD and I've never known it. But one of those, because I love to be able to spread myself out and learn from all different angles. And I think everything from you ask my kids, they say she loves business. I do. I love business. I love building businesses. I love thinking about business. To me, everything, and maybe it was because of my childhood, but everything is around that business mentality to me. So I do think about things in the way, like, it doesn't matter if it's coming from a completely different industry, but what they might be doing might be so cool to cross over into an industry that's unrelated. But I was reading something literally about Taco Bell and Kentucky Fried Chicken. That was an AI component, an AI tool that they're adding to be able to track and measure some results from their store employees, and if they're actually adding on more fries or whatever it is to orders. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, because I was on the phone with the retailer yesterday who was looking for some KPI measurements for their staff and some tools that they could use for their teams to say, how can they sell more? In this case, it was sneakers. How can they actually sell more sneakers? What kind of KPIs should they be looking for? So I wonder how that could actually work in this world, So it doesn't have to come within your own sector. I'm very much a believer that that's why I really like to be informed across so many different avenues to see what works in one and how we can bring it to the other. But I think 2024 is going to be a very interesting year from a business standpoint. And I'm sorry, I keep freezing here, but it's going to be an interesting year from a business standpoint. But I hope it's going to be a very productive year on the personal front, because I'm going to make sure that I'm spending the time allocating the time to do that. And, I think my kids are getting older as well. So they're now kind of young adults, I would say, as embarrassing as that sounds sometimes. It's like they're in that college age range. And I look at that and I'm like, time flies. So how am I going to make sure I'm as present as I can be while still making sure that I'm covering the responsibilities that I have, and also feeding what the joy is that business brings me, or relationships or networking, because I do get a lot of joy out of that.
I love it. And I just feel creativity from you at every angle. Creative thoughts around opportunities, problems, solutions, personal, professional. And does one person come to mind when I say the word renegade?
Well, you, first of all, because
that was not a loaded question.
I told you this. I have been watching your Instagram stories. I've been paying attention to things. I love one in particular, your story about when you were on the airplane with Shaquille O'Neal, and I think it was his Twitter account, right? And he didn't know how to get back into it. And then he's like, well, why don't you do it? And that was probably for you, your like, why not now moment, or one of your why not now moments. But I remember thinking about that. I thought, gosh, she was right on the pulse, and young and vivacious, and right there with people who had influence. And you may not have known it at the time, but that really helped you become the renegade that you are today, because you had people who believed in you and who said, why not you? Why don't you go do it? And I think we all need to be that for each other. I would love if women could do that more to one another and for one another, because we need to sponsor people when they're not in the room. We need to be able to help and uplift them as well, and say, like, why not you? These are your skills. Or why not come here and let me give you that seat at the table? Let me bring you into the room, bring you into the boardroom, just hear what's going on, so that all of a sudden you're not thrown into a boardroom one day and have no idea how to respond, how to behave, what they're looking for, et cetera. So I really think that times have changed. When I was starting out in the industry and in business, there were no communities. These days, there are lots of communities, right? And the Renegade community that you built, it's incredible. And if women can be helpful to each other in that regard, that will make us all a much, much better place to live and work.
Absolutely. And I think about who introduced us, Phyllis Newhouse, who is all about rocks, the resources, opportunities, connections. And I've been a recipient, so grateful, and hopefully have paid it forward. But you're exactly right. And I think, as I look at everything, every step of the way, you've shown, even in corporate, renegading your way through that, which isn't always the most conducive. But I appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing, and leading with the story you led with is extremely valuable. So thank you. And please come back. I'd love to check in, and we'll make sure we do this again.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. This is real life, and I appreciate that we can actually be vulnerable and actually share those aspects that have informed our decisions of where and why we are where we are today. And for me, it certainly was a big one. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?